While interviews may not be the primary method for gathering information when investigating cybersecurity incidents, they play a vital role in obtaining valuable insights from witnesses and suspects. When done properly, interviews can provide key pieces of information that complement other investigative techniques, ultimately contributing to the successful resolution of cybersecurity incidents. Hi, my name is Roy Borgen. I'm the founder and CEO of ShieldTech. Effective communication is important when conducting interviews, as it helps to establish trust with the person you are interviewing. Becoming proficient at conducting interviews requires extensive training and practice, and this lesson serves as a starting point for further developing your skills and knowledge in the area. By the end of this lesson, you should have a solid understanding of the 8-phase interview model and be able to approach interviews with confidence and professionalism in a cybersecurity context. This foundation will allow you to leverage interviews as a valuable tool alongside other investigative methods for resolving and addressing cybersecurity incidents. The purpose of this lesson is to provide a fundamental understanding of the interview process, key factors to consider, and best practices for conducting interviews in cybersecurity investigations. We will start off by looking at a definition of suspect and witness. This is important before we dive deeper into the 8-phase model. The 8-phase interview model we have adapted from the Norwegian Police serves as the basis for this lesson. We will go through all the phases in the interview model and then provide some general tips for a successful interview. Lastly, we'll touch on the oral principle when it comes to interviews and testimony in courts. In this lesson, we'll be discussing the concept of suspect and witness within the context of an interview. It is essential to have a clear understanding of these terms before we proceed further. To ensure clarity, let's define what we mean when we refer to suspect and witness. A suspect is an individual believed to have committed a crime or an illegal act. Typically identified through an investigation, a suspect is considered a person of interest in the case. Suspects may be interviewed by law enforcement or other authorities, and if evidence of their involvement in criminal or illegal activities is found, they may be subjected to arrest and prosecution. A witness is an individual who possesses information or knowledge about a crime or an event related to an investigation. Witnesses may have seen or heard something related to the crime or event, or may have information that can assist in the investigation. Unlike suspects, witnesses are not believed to have committed the crime or illegal act. They are typically interviewed to gather information and evidence that can be used in the investigation. The 8-phase interview model, developed by the Norwegian Police and taught at the Norwegian Police University College, provides a structured and systematic method for conducting interviews, allowing investigators to obtain an unbiased and accurate account from the interviewee. This model is particularly useful for gathering accurate and relevant information from witnesses and suspects in legal and investigative contexts, including cybersecurity incidents. By following the steps outlined in this model, we can ensure that the interviews are conducted fairly and effective, leading to successful resolution of cybersecurity incidents. The model consists of 8 phases. In the first phase, the planning phase, we determine who will be interviewed, the purpose of the interview, and the questions that will be asked. In the introduction and establishing contact phase, we establish rapport with the interviewee, explain the purpose of the interview, and inform them of their rights. In phase 3, the coherent explanation phase, we allow the interviewee to tell their story in a coherent and uninterrupted manner. In the clarifying and elaborating questions phase, phase 4, we ask questions to clarify and expand on the interviewee's story. Then in phase 5, the confrontational and controlling phase, we will confront the interviewee with the contradictions in their statement, tackle discrepancies, counter evasive behavior, and present evidence effectively. Phase 6 is the statements and requests phase. Here the interviewee is consulted to verify the accuracy of their statement and given the opportunity to provide clarification or additional statements. The interviewee will also be given the opportunity to request further investigation steps. In Phase 7, the conclusions phase, the interview is ended, and the interviewee is informed of any follow-up steps that may be taken. Lastly, in Phase 8, the content control and evaluation phase, we will be reviewing the interview for accuracy and completeness and evaluate the effectiveness of the interview process. It is important to note that we may move back and forth between Phase 2 to 5 during the interview as needed, depending on the information provided by the interviewee and the progress of the interview. Each of these phases serve a specific purpose, and together they form a structured and effective approach to interviewing. We will explore each of these phases in more detail and look at the techniques interviewers use to conduct effective interviews. The planning phase is the first crucial step in conducting an effective interview. This phase involves several important tasks that must be carefully considered and executed to maximize the chance of obtaining accurate and reliable information. The first step of the planning phase is to determine the interview's objective. Generally, the goal is to gather information and evidence that can further the investigation, establish rapport with the interviewee, or both. While obtaining a confession is not necessarily a primary aim, it can be an important outcome if the evidence supports it. The interviewer should conduct the interview to maximize the chance of obtaining accurate and reliable information. By clearly identifying the purpose, the interviewer can tailor their approach and questions accordingly. If the person being interviewed does not speak the same language as the interviewer, using an interpreter may be necessary. In this case, the interviewer should ensure that the interpreter is qualified, impartial, and understand the interview's subject matter. The interviewer should also consider the potential impact of using an interpreter on the process, such as the potential for miscommunication or loss of nonverbal cues. Ensuring an accurate audio recording of the interview is vital for reviewing, analyzing, and potentially using the material in a legal proceeding. The interviewer must guarantee that the audio recording equipment operates effectively, capturing all details and subtleties of the conversation. An audio recording provides a comprehensive account of how the interview was conducted, serving as evidence that proper procedures were followed and no coercion was involved. This documentation benefits both the interviewer and the interviewee, as it eliminates any ambiguity about what was said during the exchange, offering reassurance and clarity to all parties involved. To prepare for the interview, the interviewer should collect as much background information as possible about the interviewee and the case. This may include reviewing existing reports or statements, researching the person's background and history, and identifying potential areas of interest or concern. Based on the interview's purpose and the background information gathered, the interviewer should devise a plan of action. This may include identifying the questions to be asked, determining the location and timing of the interview, and selecting any necessary equipment or resources. The interviewer should anticipate potential changes or obstacles that may arise during the interview and develop strategies for addressing these issues. For example, if the interviewee is uncooperative or hostile, the interviewer may need to use different techniques to establish rapport and gain their trust. The interviewer must be vigilant in addressing any ethical and legal issues that may surface during the interview. I earlier briefly mentioned the use of an interpreter. If you during the course of an interview notice that the interviewee has problems expressing themselves with the desired level of detail and is unable to communicate effectively, you have an obligation to terminate the interview and ensure that they get the assistance of an interpreter. This is particularly important if the interviewee is a suspect. This ensures that the interviewee's thoughts and information are accurately conveyed, safeguarding their rights and protecting clear communication throughout the process. Remember, the use of force and coercion is never acceptable and must be strictly avoided in all interview situations. By carefully preparing and planning for an interview, the interviewer can increase the chances of obtaining accurate and reliable information from the interviewee. The planning phase sets the stage for the rest of the interview and is critical for the overall success of the process. The introduction phase, also known as the establishing contact phase, is the second step in the 8-phase model used by law enforcement during an interview. In this phase, the interviewer establishes a rapport with the interviewee, informs them of the purpose of the interview, and explains their rights. During the establishing contact phase, the interviewer will introduce themselves and explain their role in the investigation, explain the purpose of the interview in a non-threatening and respectful manner, inform suspects and witnesses of their rights, and establish a comfortable and non-threatening environment for the interview. The goal of the establishing contact phase is to put the interviewee at ease, establish trust, and build a rapport with them, so they are more willing to cooperate and provide accurate information during the interview. It is important to note that the interviewer should be respectful and non-threatening throughout the interview process. Suspects should be treated with dignity and respect, and their rights should always be upheld. Additionally, the interviewer should verify that the suspect is willing to participate in the interview and that they understand their rights. It is crucial to obtain voluntary and informed consent from the suspect before proceeding with the interview. When conducting interviews as part of a cybersecurity investigation, private companies have a responsibility to inform employees of their rights and ensure those rights are protected throughout the interview process. For employees, this may include the option of having a trusted person present during the interview, as long as the person has no role in the case under investigation. This can provide additional comfort and reassurance and demonstrate the company's commitment to conducting the interview fairly and transparently. Both suspect and witnesses need to be informed about their rights, and they need to acknowledge that they understand them. And these rights must be upheld throughout the interview process. Let's examine the rights of a suspect. A suspect has the right to know the case. At this point, don't disclose any evidence, but inform them what they are suspected of. Suspects are not under any obligation to give a statement. They can have an attorney present during the interview, and they should be encouraged to give a truthful statement. They should also be informed that a confession to a crime may result in a penalty discount if the case were to end up in a court of law. However, you cannot guarantee this, as this will be up to the court's discretion and legal practice. Before presenting these rights to the suspect, the interviewer can provide an introduction such as, "In order to ensure a transparent interview process, we will inform you of your rights as a suspect. It is essential that you understand these rights, as they will be upheld throughout the interview." Let's examine the rights of a witness. Witnesses have the right to know what you'd like an explanation about. You do not necessarily need to inform them about the whole case. They are not under any obligation to give a statement. They do not need to disclose any information that could lead to themselves or anyone in their close relations to be charged for a crime. This is based on the human right that they do not need to self-incriminate. And close relations refers to immediate family or spouse, for instance mother, brother, father, husband, wife, partner, etc. They should also be informed that they do not need to explain anything that could lead to loss of reputation or social standing. This refers to situations where the witness cannot explain without disclosing sensitive or personal information, such as unconventional sexual preferences or other private matters. And lastly, witnesses need to be encouraged to give a truthful statement. It is illegal for witnesses to give a false statement to the police or courts. However, this is not the case when giving a statement to a private company. When communicating the rights, the information should be communicated in a language that the employee understands, and if necessary, an interpreter should be provided. The information should be provided in an easily understood format, such as a written document or an oral explanation. The information should be clearly explained, and any questions the employee have should be answered. The company should comply with any requests made by the employee related to their rights, such as providing an attorney or interpreter. And again, remember to handle the interview process in a non-coercive and respectful manner, and protect the rights of suspects and witnesses throughout the process. Keep records of the rights being informed and the acknowledgement received in case it becomes necessary to prove that the rights were communicated. This can be done by having the suspects or witness sign a summary of the interview where the informed rights are written. Optionally, a separate document can be used. Additionally, the interview should always be audio recorded. The coherent explanation phase is the third phase in the process of conducting an interview. During this phase, the interviewer aims to gather a clear and coherent account of events or information from the interviewee. This slide provides an overview of the key considerations during the coherent explanation phase. Encourage open-ended response. To gather a coherent account, it is important to encourage the interviewee to provide open-ended responses. This can be achieved by using open-ended questions that require more than simply a yes or no answer. Allow the interviewee to speak. It is important to allow the interviewee to speak without interruptions during this phase. This helps them to provide a complete and accurate account of events or information without feeling pressured or rushed. Active listening. Active listening is an important skill during this phase. This includes paying attention to the interviewee's tone of voice, body language, and choice of words. It also involves asking clarifying questions when necessary to ensure that the interviewer fully understands what the interviewee is saying. Avoid leading questions. Leading questions can bias the interviewee's responses and may result in inaccurate information. It is important to avoid leading questions to allow the interviewee to provide their own account of events or information. Provide support. Providing support to the interviewee during this phase can help establish trust and encourage them to share more information. This can include acknowledging their emotions or feelings, providing reassurances, and validating their account. Take notes. Taking notes during the coherent explanation phase is important to ensure that all relevant information is captured accurately. However, it is important to balance note-taking with active listening to avoid missing important information. Establish a timeline. Encourage the interviewee to provide a chronological account of the events, as this can help to organize the information and identify any gaps or inconsistencies in their story. Use of visual aids. In some cases, using visual aids such as maps, diagrams, or photographs can help the interviewee better recall events and provide more detailed accounts. It can also help the interviewer understand the context and spatial relationships better. Recap and summarize. At the end of the coherent explanation phase, the interviewer can summarize the key points discussed and give the interviewee an opportunity to correct and clarify any misunderstandings. This can help to ensure that the interviewer has accurately captured the interviewee's account of events. Adapt communication style. Be aware of the interviewee's communication style and adapt your own style accordingly. For example, some people may prefer a more structured, step-by-step approach to recounting events, while others may prefer a more conversational style. The coherent explanation phase is critical in gathering a clear and coherent account of events or information from the interviewee. By incorporating these key points, the interviewer can gather accounts and reliable information that can be used in the investigation or prosecution. The clarifying and elaborating questions phase is the fourth step in the process of conducting an interview. During this phase, the interviewer focuses on gathering more detailed information, clarifying any ambiguity, and addressing inconsistencies in the interviewee's initial account. This phase is crucial for obtaining a comprehensive understanding of the events and ensuring the accuracy of the information provided. Here are some key considerations during the clarifying and elaborating questions phase. Identify inconsistencies or gaps. Review the interviewee's account from the coherent explanation phase and identify any inconsistencies, gaps, or unclear statements that needs further clarification or elaboration. Prepare questions. Develop a list of specific questions to identify the inconsistencies or gaps. Make sure the questions are open-ended, clear, and unleading to encourage the interviewee to provide accurate and detailed information. Use probing techniques. Use probing techniques, such as follow-up questions, or prompting the interviewee to provide more information on specific topics. This can help elicit additional details and insights that may not have been mentioned in the initial account. Maintain a neutral tone. Approach the clarifying and elaborating questions phase with a neutral and non-judgmental tone. This will help maintain rapport and trust with the interviewee, encouraging them to be more forthcoming with information. Address any contradictions. If contradictions arise between the interviewee's account and other evidence or witnesses' statements, address these discrepancies in a non-confrontational manner. Ask the interviewee to explain or clarify these inconsistencies better to understand their perspective. Verify details. Verify key details provided by the interviewee, such as dates, times, locations, and the identities of individuals involved. This can help to ensure the accuracy of the information gathered and assist in building a solid case. Use active listening. Continue to practice active listening throughout this phase by paying attention to the interviewee's verbal and nonverbal cues, asking clarifying questions when necessary, and providing support and reassurance. Take notes. As with the previous phase, it is essential to take notes during the clarifying and elaborating questions phase to accurately capture all relevant information. Balance note-taking with active listening to avoid missing important details. Recap and confirm. At the end of the clarifying and elaborating questions phase, summarize the key points discussed and any new information obtained. Give the interviewee an opportunity to correct, clarify, or confirm any misunderstandings. This helps to ensure that the interviewer has accurately captured the interviewee's account. Transition to the next phase. Once all inconsistencies, gaps, and ambiguities have been addressed, smoothly transition to the next phase of the interview process. The clarifying and elaborating questions phase is vital for obtaining a comprehensive, accurate understanding of the events or information under investigation. By addressing any inconsistencies or gaps in the interviewee's account, the interviewer can gather detailed and reliable information that can be used in the investigation or prosecution. In the clarifying and elaborating questions phase, it is essential to use open-ended questions to encourage the interviewee to provide more details and insights into their account of events. Open-ended questions allows the interviewee to share information without being restricted by the interviewee's preconceived notions or expectations. These questions promote a deeper understanding of the situation and enables the interviewer to gather more accurate and comprehensive information. In this slide, we've provided some open-ended questions that can be used during the clarifying and elaborating questions phase. Let's go through them. Please describe more details what happened immediately before the incident. You mentioned you were with a group of people. Who were they, and what was your relationship with them? How did you feel when the incident occurred? Can you elaborate on your emotions and thoughts at the time? Tell me about the sequence of events after the incident. Please walk me through the timeline as you recall it. Explain how the interactions between the individuals involved in the incident unfolded. You mentioned that you noticed something unusual. Tell me more about this. Explain to me how the people around you reacted during and after the incident. What, if any, conversations did you have with others about the incident? And how did those conversations influence your understanding of the situation? Looking back, is there anything you wish you'd done differently in response to the incident? These open-ended questions are designed to encourage the interviewee to provide more detailed information and elaborate on their initial account. By asking open-ended questions, the interviewer can gather a clearer and more comprehensive understanding of the events or information under investigation. The confrontational and controlling phase is the fifth step in the interview process. In this phase, the interviewer challenges the interviewee's statement, addresses any discrepancies or inconsistencies in their account, and confronts evasive behavior. This phase is crucial for assessing the credibility of the interviewee's account and obtaining more accurate information. During the confrontational and controlling phase, the interviewer should point out any inconsistencies or contradictions in the interviewee's account, comparing it to known facts or evidence. This will help determine whether the interviewee is providing truthful information or attempting to deceive. Challenge the interviewee's account. The interviewer should use information and evidence gathered in the previous phases to challenge the interview's version of events, asking them to explain any discrepancies or inconsistencies in their story. Provide opportunities for clarification. The interviewer should give the interviewee the chance to clarify and amend their statement, enabling them to address any inconsistencies or contradictions in their account. Maintain control. The interviewer should maintain control over the conversation, directing it towards relevant topics and ensuring the interviewee remains focused on the issue at hand. Use evidence strategically. Presenting evidence during this phase can be an effective way of confronting the interviewee with contradictions or discrepancies in their account. However, the interviewer should be cautious not to reveal all their evidence at once, as it may allow the interviewee to adjust their story to fit the available information. Adapt questioning techniques. The interviewer may need to adapt their questioning techniques during this phase to encourage the interviewee to provide accurate information. This could include using leading questions or hypothetical scenarios to challenge the interviewee's version of the events. Maintain rapport. While the confrontational and controlling phase is more challenging for the interviewee, the interviewer should continue to maintain rapport and treat the interviewee with respect. This helps to keep the interviewee engaged and cooperative, even when facing difficult questions. Evaluate interviewee's responses. The interviewer should assess the interviewee's responses to confrontation and control. Take note of any potential deception, evasiveness, or genuine explanations. This helps the interviewer determine the credibility of the interviewee's account and guide the direction of the interview. Be flexible and adapt to the interviewee's reactions. During the confrontation and controlling phase, the interviewer should be prepared to adjust their approach based on the interviewee's responses to confrontation and control. Being flexible and adaptive can help to ensure that the interview remains productive, even when the interviewee reacts unexpectedly or displays resistance. Be mindful of the interviewee's emotional state. During the confrontational and controlling phase, the interviewee may become emotional or agitated. It is important for the interviewer to remain sensitive to the interviewee's emotions while maintaining professionalism. This includes providing reassurance or support when appropriate, or adjust the approach of questioning to avoid escalating the situation. During the confrontational and controlling phase, it is important to ask questions that challenge the interviewee's account while maintaining professionalism and a respectful tone. To illustrate how to apply these principles during the confrontational and controlling phase, consider the following examples of effective questioning. You said you left work at 17. However, our logs show that you were still logged in at 18:30. Tell me more about that. You said that you have never met anyone working for our competitor, company XYZ. However, you later mentioned Mr. Y. Explain this to me. You mentioned that you only had access to low-level confidential data, but our records indicate that you had access to highly sensitive information. Can you clarify this discrepancy? You stated that you do not have the necessary technical skills to perform the actions that led to the security incident. However, we found evidence that you attended a specialized training course in the past. Can you please elaborate on your training and experience? During the confrontational and controlling phase, new evidence or statements may come to light, suggesting that the interviewee's status changes from witness to suspect. If this occurs, the interviewer should take the following actions before proceeding with the interview. The interviewee should be informed that they are now considered a suspect and that the information they provide may be used against them in a court of law. They should also be informed of their rights as a suspect, such as the right to remain silent and the right for legal representation. The change of status should be recorded in the interview notes or transcript, and the reason for the change should be clearly stated. After addressing the change in status, the interviewer can continue the interview, adjusting their approach as necessary given the new status of the interviewee. The confrontational and controlling phase should be approached with caution, as overly aggressive or accusatory questioning can damage rapport and lead to the interviewee becoming defensive or uncooperative. The interviewer should strike a balance between firmly challenging the interviewee and maintaining a respectful and non-threatening environment. The statements and request phase is the sixth step in the interview model. In this phase, the interviewee is consulted to verify the accuracy of the recorded statement and given the opportunity to provide clarification or additional statements. The interviewee is also given the opportunity to request further investigation steps. During the statements and requests phase, the interviewer will summarize the main points of the interviewee's account of events. The interviewer will recap the information obtained from the interviewee, ensuring that both parties have a clear and common understanding of the interviewee's story. Verify the accuracy of the interviewee's story. The interviewer should cross-check the information provided by the interviewee against the evidence and information gathered during the previous phases. Provide the interviewee an opportunity to correct any inaccuracy or inconsistencies. The interviewer should allow the interviewee to address any identified discrepancies and add any further information they deem necessary. Request additional statements or information. The interviewer may ask the interviewee to provide further clarification on specific aspects of their story, to discuss any concerns they may have. Encourage the interviewee to make requests. The interviewer should ask the interviewee if they have any requests or suggestions for the investigation team, such as conducting specific follow-up inquiries or contacting any other individuals who may be able to collaborate their account. Document the interviewee's statements and requests. The interviewer should ensure that all statements and requests made by the interviewee during this phase are accurately documented in the interview notes or transcript. This will help the investigation team follow up on the interviewee's suggestions and ensure that their input is properly considered. It is important to remember that the statements and requests phase play a crucial role in ensuring the accuracy and completeness of information obtained during the interview. The interviewer should maintain a respectful and professional approach throughout this phase, giving the interviewee the opportunity to contribute to the investigation and clarify any misunderstandings. This will not only help to strengthen the overall investigation, but also foster a sense of cooperation and trust between the interviewer and the interviewee. The conclusion phase is the seventh step in the interview model. In this phase, the interviewer wraps up the interview and provides the interviewee an opportunity to make a final statement. During the conclusion phase, the interviewer will thank the interviewee for their cooperation. The interviewer should express appreciation for the interviewee's participation and cooperation throughout the process. Inform the interviewee of the next steps in the investigation. The interviewer should explain what will happen after the interview, including any additional investigation steps or actions that may be taken based on the information provided. Provide the interviewee an opportunity to make a final statement. The interviewer should allow the interviewee to share any last thoughts or concerns before concluding the interview. Review and sign the interview transcript or notes. The interviewer and the interviewee should review the transcript or notes from the interview together. Ensure that all relevant information has been accurately recorded. Both parties should then sign the document, confirming its accuracy and completeness. End the interview in a respectful and non-threatening manner. The interviewer should ensure that the interview ends on a positive note, demonstrating respect for the interviewee and maintaining the rapport established during the interview process. Retain the importance of the interviewee's cooperation. The interviewer should remind the interviewee of the value of their information and how it may contribute to the overall investigation. It is crucial to remember that the conclusion phase serves as an essential step in bringing the interview to a respectful and professional close. The interviewer should maintain the rapport established throughout the interview process and leave the interviewee with a positive impression. Ensuring a smooth and respectful conclusion helps to maintain the credibility of the investigation process and may encourage the interviewee to remain cooperative in any further interactions related to the case. The content control and evaluation phase is the 8th and final step in the interview model. In this phase, the interviewer reviews the information gathered during the interview, evaluates its accuracy and relevance, and identifies any areas requiring further investigation or follow-up. During the content control and evaluation phase, the interviewer should review the transcripts or notes. The interviewer should carefully go through the transcripts or notes from the interview, ensuring that all relevant information has been accurately recorded, as well as documented. Assess the credibility and reliability of the information. The interviewer should evaluate the interviewee's statements, considering factors such as consistency, plausibility, and collaboration with other evidence or witness accounts. This will help determine the accuracy and trustworthiness of the information provided. Identify gaps or inconsistencies. The interviewer should pinpoint any gaps or inconsistencies in the interviewee's account, highlighting areas that may require further investigation or clarification. Determine the need for additional interviews or follow-ups. Based on the assessment of the information gathered during the interview, the interviewer should decide whether additional interviews are necessary or if further follow-ups is required with the interviewee or other potential witnesses. Evaluate the effectiveness of the interview process. The interviewer should reflect on the interview process, considering the techniques used, the rapport established, and overall success in obtaining relevant and reliable information. This self-assessment can help inform improvements and adjustments to future interviews. Document the findings and conclusions. The interviewer should create a detailed report outlining the findings, conclusions, and any recommended actions or follow-ups based on the interview. This report will serve as a crucial piece of the overall cybersecurity investigation and may inform subsequent steps in the process. By carefully controlling and evaluating the content of the interviewer can ensure that the information obtained is accurate, reliable, and useful in furthering the cybersecurity investigation. This phase also allows the interviewer to refine their techniques and approach for future interviews and continually improving their skills and effectiveness. As mentioned in the beginning of this lesson, mastering the art of conducting interviews takes time and practice. As long as you have ensured that the employee has been given their rights and that they have understood them, there is room for errors in the process. Only by evaluating our interviews can we become truly skilled at conducting them. In this slide, we've summarized some important parts for ensuring a successful interview. Let's go through them one by one. The first thing is to be prepared. Gather as much information about the case and the interviewee as possible before the interview, and prepare a list of questions. Establish a rapport. Start the interview by building a rapport with the interviewee, and explain the purpose of the interview in a non-threatening manner. Ask open-ended questions. Encourage the interviewee to tell their story in their own words by asking open-ended questions. Verify and challenge. Confirm the interviewee's story by asking specific questions and challenge any inconsistencies or contradictions in their account. Listen actively. Pay close attention to the interviewee's responses and take notes for later reference. Use non-leading questions. Pose questions in a non-leading manner to obtain the most accurate and unbiased information from the interviewee. Respect rights. Conduct the interview in a non-coercive, non-threatening, and respectful manner, ensuring that the interviewee's rights are respected. Summarize and clarify. Conduct the interview in a non-coercive manner. Recap the main points of the interview and seek clarification on any unclear or confusing aspect of the interviewee's story. Be flexible. Remain open to adjusting your questioning and the interview's direction if needed, and be prepared to revisit previous phases as new information emerges. Evaluate. After the interview, assess the information gathered, the progression of the interview, and the interviewee's behavior to help draw conclusions. When conducting a cybersecurity investigation, it is essential to consider the possibility of criminal charges against an employee. If it becomes apparent before conducting an interview that the company is likely to file a police report for a criminal investigation against an employee, it is best for private companies to gather evidence in accordance with best practices and then turn it over to the police for further investigation and interviews. This approach ensures that the rights of all parties are protected and that the investigation is conducted in a legally compliant manner. In general, interviews conducted by law enforcement are considered more credible and reliable than those conducted by private individuals or companies. They are therefore more likely to be admissible in a court of law. This is because law enforcement officers have the necessary training and experience to conduct interviews in a legally compliant manner, ensuring that the rights of all parties involved are protected. However, it is not strictly necessary for law enforcement to conduct interviews for them to be admissible in a court of law. Interviews conducted by private individuals or organizations can also be admissible if they were conducted in a legally compliant manner and that the rights of all parties were protected. It is important to keep in mind that the admissibility of an interview in a court of law will depend on the specific law and regulations of the jurisdiction in question, as well as the specific circumstances of the case. Additionally, the fact that law enforcement conduct interviews does not necessarily guarantee admissibility. The interview must follow the rule of evidence, and the interviewee's rights must have been respected. The oral principle, or oral evidence rule, is a legal principle that states that, in general, evidence presented in court must be given orally. This means that evidence should be presented by witnesses or experts, who is physically present in court and can answer questions and be cross-examined. The oral principle is based on the idea that oral evidence is more reliable and credible than written evidence, as it allows the assessment of the witness's credibility and the reliability of their testimony through observations of their demeanor and their ability to answer questions. In the context of interviews conducted during cybersecurity investigations, it is crucial to understand that your interview with an employee may be the only statement that a suspect ever provides. In many cases, suspects may choose not to give any further statements after the initial interview. This highlights the importance of being prepared to testify in court about the details of the interview and the information that was disclosed. Your testimony may serve as a crucial piece of evidence in the investigation, and it is essential that it's conducted in a legally compliant and credible manner. If the interview was audio recorded, the court may choose to play that audio recording. Although the oral principle generally applies to court, It may vary depending on the jurisdiction and the legal system. Some legal systems allow written evidence to be presented in court. It is important to note that this principle does not mean that the written evidence, such as documents, statements, or other interviews, may not be presented in court, but it must be supported by oral testimony. Additionally, there are exceptions to the oral principle, such as certain types of evidence, like scientific or technical evidence, that may be presented in a written form. The 8-phase interview model is a powerful tool for both law enforcement and cybersecurity professionals. Mastering this complex and nuanced topic requires dedicated training and practice. By gaining a fundamental understanding of the process, key factors to consider, and best practices, you will be better equipped to approach interviews with confidence and professionalism in the cybersecurity context. Remember, the primary goal of the interview is to gather accurate and reliable information that can be used to advance the investigation. With the knowledge and skills acquired in this training, you are well on your way to become a skilled interviewer. We encourage you to continue developing your skills and deepen your knowledge in this area through further training and practice. Thank you for taking your time to learn about the 8-phase interview model for conducting interviews. My name is Roy Borgen and I'm ShieldTech's founder and CEO. If you have any questions, please email us on info@shieldtech.no.